everyone. This is Judy from HYPIA, and today we are going to talk to Dr. Usman Chohan. Am I pronouncing it right?
Good enough.
And he is the president of HYPIA. Yay! So thank you for this interview. And would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Dr. Usman Chohan. I am the president and founder of HYPIA. I am an American-born Canadian Pakistani, and I have lived in 11 countries for a period of 1 year or more. I did my PhD in Australia, my MBA in Canada. I work for a research institute in Pakistan, for which I was also founder in 2018. Um, and I created HYPIA in 2016, and that has allowed me to meet wonderful people like you.
Yay, yeah. I Yeah, I'm very honored to be a part of HYPIA and especially one of the directors of outreach. And thank you for nominating me into that position. And so let's talk about languages first. So what made you get into all these languages and learn them all?
It started with just circumstances. My mother is also a hyperpolyglot. She's also in HYPIA, and I'm a third culture kid, so I had exposure to other
Mhm.
languages anyways. So I was born in the United States, and so English was used a lot, but at home Urdu was used, and I heard a lot of Punjabi as well. In high school, you have to take a language. I took French, but it's also a language that my parents had communicated to with each other. So I'd always
Mhm.
heard it in some to some degree. And then when I was working at the National Bank of Canada to find a hobby to do, something fun outside, I did Spanish, and my family had moved to Argentina at that time, so it was useful. Then Portuguese was added on. Then I took an interest because this just train starts and then you just keep rolling with it. I studied Japanese and then lived in Japan for a bit. I studied Chinese for 3 years and was in China for a year. And then I studied Hindi separately, which is a little bit similar to Urdu, so it helped a lot. And then studied a bunch of others. So on a good day, I speak 11, and on a bad day, I have at least seven languages. So it's just a mix of like boredom, a mix of exposure, a mix of like circumstance. And although I was adding, I have actually stagnated, unfortunately. And so I have to think about adding new languages in the future.
Wow, that's very impressive. You speak 11 languages and you're constantly adding new languages. And do you have a specific method that you use when you learn languages?
I do go the old school route, which is to say you find a teacher and you find a grammar book and you go through all the verbs or you go through all the characters or whatever and just go the old school way. Because the reason is because once you have done that for one or two languages, your mind actually does start thinking along those lines. So what
Mm.
happens is if you are concentrated towards, let's say, grammar and stuff, the next time you see a language with similar grammar, it does kind of fill in the blanks automatically. Now, after that, you want to supplement it. So the best method I find is to do everything you like, but in this new language. So watch all your favorite shows, play your favorite video games, and do everything that you've done in life already and enjoyed in this new language. And in the modern world with subtitles and so
Mhm.
on, and just language settings, you can actually do that. So this is the best way, I think, to proceed with it. You can add a ton of languages this way as long as you put the time.
Wow. So, how were you able to use your language skills in your career?
Depends. So I, for example, now do write in languages other than English because I want to reach out to specific audiences. I
Mhm.
did have to polish my Urdu a lot. Then have gone on the radio in Hindi, or for example, I've published peer-reviewed stuff in Spanish. So it actually depends on initiative more so than the imposition.
Mm.
I'm not asked to do anything ever in anything other than English just because it is so prominent. But I go the extra mile because there are specific audiences I want to reach to, or there are specific messages I need to communicate. And for that, languages have come in very handy. That happens all the time
Yeah.
because the world seems like it's all English, but it's not. And there is huge
Mm-hmm.
value to reaching out. You communicate a certain idea to a certain group of people much better in a certain language than having it in the generic space that is dominated by English. So that's how I've ended up using it on the research side, or in writing for the public interest, or in appearing on the media. In the previous lives of like finance, it didn't help much other than perhaps reading financial statements, and but that's the
Mm-hmm.
nature of the job. It's more math based anyways. But as far as interacting with people goes, languages really go a long way in targeted manner.
Yeah. So outside from career, we can use languages in our daily lives and making connections with other people. And how have languages helped you personally in your personal life?
It has been the backbone of my personal life because I have
Yeah.
been able to interact with people at a far larger scope, right? So that means
Yeah.
that my circle of friends essentially at this stage in life is HYPIA people, right? So you just build a
Oh,
community around the idea that they speak other languages. Uh, that's part of the reason for that is that sometimes you live in societies where you don't get exposed to all the languages. So, for example, if you're in Seoul, you can't use all the languages you know. In
yeah.
Islamabad, I can't use all the languages I know unless I go into the diplomatic enclave or something. So otherwise, I end up using a set of languages, Urdu, Punjabi, English generally every day. But then for the extra stuff, my circle of friends is decentralized. And for that, I have HYPIA, right? We have HYPIA. So that
Yeah.
helps us to remain exposed every day to all the languages we know.
Yeah.
And as you know, there is this very vibrant chat, this hyperpolyglot chat on WhatsApp, and it's like 100 messages a day, and they're never from one language. So you're constantly being stimulated in the languages. And so on the personal side, um, having Hypia means that we have constant connection to all the languages we know, or even the ones we don't know but wish to learn. So that's part of the magic of having this, that my social life is very
Hmm.
much around Hypia. And if I am not a bit withdrawn, if I'm not always in the heat of things in Hypia, it's because there's other things in life. But when you do want social stuff, it's there for us, right?
Yeah. I truly believe it's an amazing organization. And I would like to ask you, did you how did you decide to create that organization, HYPIA?
It's a good question because I am working on the genealogy of this stuff now, thinking back to why it happened. The reason is because my journey of learning languages was very solitary. So I wasn't part of a
Mm.
big global community online or virtual spaces that did exist. So there are people like
Oh,
Richard Simcott who had created this. I had no idea of these things. I came from a finance
oh,
background, working in my own
yeah.
world, right? You just don't know that this is happening. So my idea was that there must be other people like me, and there must not
Oh,
be also like me part of this whatever center stage. So why isn't there something for them? I think there should be something for them. And the
mm,
idea is that you have to be above a certain threshold in languages. So it's not I love languages, but that you know what, I have
hmm,
worked to get at least six. It's an arbitrary number, but it has meaning because less than six is just could just be because of your life circumstances without effort. But 10, well, then even I wouldn't qualify. So you need something in the middle.
hmm,
Six. So what about people who are at roughly that stage? There has to be a category of people like that. I cannot be the only one. And what I have found is that, yes, there are. I mean, Hypia is like 400-ish and should increase in quickly in future years. There are people like us. And as new generations come, new people are interested in it. So that vision that there must be others like me. And what if we make a community around certain principles for them? I think they will appreciate it. So those principles are, as you know, there's no money involved. It's just a zero budget organization, totally decentralized. It operates on merit. So you have been nominated on merit for your role in HYPIA from all over the world, bringing us together. We can work around principles like inclusivity and zero budget and all this to make something more optimal for a certain tranche or component within a wider polyglot community. That was my intention when I look back at it now.
Then how did you reach out to other polyglots when you first created the organization? Did you know
Because I didn't
people
know.
or?
This is a very good point because I didn't know the polyglot community in any sense. I had been roaming around doing my own stuff. So I just created a website and said, here we go. There were a few people like me that I had met, fellow travelers along the years. Those are the first to be recruited. I was, for example, part of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers. So there were some shapers I knew, or some other people like that. But in the process, there were people who had been exploring stuff in their own, and they discovered that HYPIA's website exists. So they reached out, and from that stock, I picked the people who were most passionate and most contributory. They then spearheaded it in their areas. So in South America, we have a vibrant movement because our director of recruitment, Matthias, is very passionate. We have a research side that became very strong since Carlos joined. We have had good work on outreach by your predecessor, Eduardo, and now by you, and so on. So other people then came and they brought with them energies and regional focuses that strengthened HYPIA. I, for example, did not know that Europe was the place of concentration. I've only lived for like 3 years total in Europe, so I had no concept. And I also didn't know that South America was this vibrant on the polyglot side, like Brazil and Argentina and Mexico and Colombia have large communities of this, right, proportionally. So I was very impressed. I would never have known that. But that since people from there came, they built those zones up within Hypia so that Europe and South America are like disproportionate. And now you are Asian. Let's get the Asian part going, right? I'm Asian too. So let's get that
Yeah,
going.
definitely. Yeah. So what would be your goal or what would you like to achieve through HYPIA?
It's already done its part by being a permanent home for people on their language journeys, right? So when you make it to a certain stage, like in a video game, you hit a certain checkpoint that you can rest. This is that place you can rest and meet people like you to give you momentum for the next stage as you learn. So it's not so much about Hypia, but what it can do for others. And Hypia has actually changed the lives of people who I would never have met in person. And there are amazing stories of that. Some are on our website, some are on our YouTube channel. People who lived in almost complete isolation from polyglottery, and yet they had worked so hard, and now they felt part of something for the first time in their lives that really reflected who they are. It has been life-changing for them. So Hypia should continue to be life-changing for people like that. That's one thing. And in terms of targets, as you say, I was throwing around a chart of like my life goals, and I hope that in my lifetime it should hit 5,000 members. It is possible because new generations are coming, but that's an arbitrary number. It could be 4,000, it could be 6,000, doesn't matter. The idea is that as new generations of polyglots come of age, they will join HYPIA and become part of this. So there is a target like that, but it's arbitrary. And then the other thing is, after you and I are gone, we get old, we die, IPS should still continue through generations. So I have a more intergenerational perspective that we yield this control and this community is there forever. And that's the ambition behind it.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. And for those who don't know what HYPIA does exactly, can you explain some of the activities that are done by HYPIA?
Yes, HYPIA does a lot of things. HYPIA is basically a place for hyperpolyglots to connect. What that means is that we have a vibrant social media presence, particularly through WhatsApp. So people are engaged all the time. If I ignore the HYPIA chat for like 2 days, there's like 500 messages, right? So there's a vibrant community. The second thing is we're working on research on polyglottery and working on this concept of critical polyglot studies. This is an idea that Carlos, our director of research, is pioneering, and I'm his sidekick in that. And we're working very heavily on this concept to really understand what it is. And we will have solid academic publications come out of that. And I have written working papers on it, and we are closely affiliated with, for example, the Hyperpolyglot Activist, which is a project of Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez. So the research side is very strong. We also used to have seminars in that regard. But because of the logistics and whatnot, we've paused the seminars, but the research side is the second part. The third part is to preserve the rare languages. So it's not just that you speak six, but those six are all Romance languages or something. We actually have an interest in preserving things that are rare. So there is a stream in Hypia where if you speak one language, but it's endangered, you can join. And so we have rare language specialists. So preserving that, and then we as a hyperpolyglot community connect with those people in their rare language. That's also part of the magic. These are the three main parts of it. Four is then we have a prominent presence within the polyglot community writ large. And that is by, for example, all four of the HYPIA directors were at the Polyglot gathering, including you. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but next time I will be there. So being part of that and reaching out so that people from that community join us, we're part of a larger, vibrant ecosystem. That's the fourth part of it. In the future, then there are other projects planned, but I don't aim to reveal them because they haven't concretized. We don't have solid concepts yet, but there's plenty more that Hypia can do. And it's quite impressive because Hypia is like 400-ish people. So as it grows, new ideas will come.
And what is the process of becoming a member of HYPIA?
There's several ways to join, but the standard format is that somebody sends an email. And then we evaluate the person. It's me or another executive of HYPIA, some admin person looks at it. You either send a video recording if you're speaking or a Zoom interview or something, some way to instantiate that you speak six languages. And sometimes we need expertise because those languages are not spoken by me, for example. And then you're in. You don't pay anything. And it's just really that simple. Actually, can you remind me how you joined Hypia? What was your story like for joining?
So I've always been involved in the polyglot community, the polyglot gathering and polyglot conference, and then through my language Instagram account, I somehow found out about HYPIA, and then I decided to reach out because I speak more than six, or yeah, slightly above six. And then I thought it was cool that there was this component of writing essays, application essay, and proving, you know, providing proof that I speak languages. So I thought it was a very professional organization in that way, in that sense. And yeah, I decided to reach out to Matthias, and then it happened.
See, easy. There you go. That's all it took.
Um, IPA is, yeah, I think it's the only organization with membership within the polyglot community, right?
Yes, it's much more specialist in that sense. So our engagement with the polyglot community ecosystem is of a specialized nature. So we are our own micro community within a larger ecosystem. You can be part of that larger ecosystem at any level, but to be part of Hypia signifies that you made effort. For example, in your case, it wasn't automatic that you would have spoken Spanish, for example, but you do.
Yeah.
And in my case, it isn't automatic. I had no exposure to China, but I did get very good at Mandarin at a certain stage in life, and then went to China. It's
Mm,
not you have to show that there was some effort involved. The exception
yeah.
is, of course,
Yeah.
rare languages, but that's a different logic, a different stream. But for the larger group of hyperpolyglots within Hypia, the idea is effort and to motivate others to have effort made towards languages. So that's the big deal behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the reason why you need to speak more than six, because there needs to be effort put into it. Otherwise, you can speak five, or no, five is a lot, but three, but you can grow up as a trilingual kid, right? So no effort put into it.
Correct. There are societies, for example, in Pakistan, all educated Pakistanis are trilingual automatically because they will know
Mm.
English, they will know Urdu, and they will know some ethnic language. So my ethnic language is Punjabi.
Mm,
They may know Pashto or something. So that automatically. In India, it's similar where you would have English and Hindi and something, right? Or English and Tamil and something. So for or in Africa, it happens a lot too. Sub-Saharan Africa, you will speak a colonial language, Portuguese, Spanish, or French, or English, and then you will have one or two ethnic ones too. So this is so common. Trilingual is automatic. Then maybe if you are a bourgeois person, you may add a French or a Spanish for fun. So four, you're already making some effort. But there are even people who by circumstance know five, but by just by chance six, I've never heard of this ever. So that's
Mm-hmm.
then the threshold. That's why.
Yeah. By chance six. Yeah. And then another question is I get asked this question often, and I want to ask you the same question. So people ask me, if you're so interested in languages, if you're constantly learning languages, why don't you study linguistics? And what's your answer to that? Have you ever considered researching linguistics or studying?
Absolutely. But the best way to do that at the stage I'm at is to either do a PhD in linguistics or to collaborate with people who have a PhD in linguistics. So our research side is very strong because Carlos does great work. So I can work next to him, with him being the leader on the project, and I can learn a lot. I always had this fantasy of doing a second PhD in linguistics, but after doing the work that I'm doing right now, God, I'm not sure I can handle it because linguistics as a subject is
Yeah.
very demanding. And that's my real point is that
Yes.
if you actually want to study linguistics, I had no idea because there is a hierarchy which is disgusting and unfair, but there's a sort of hierarchy in the social sciences of prestige, and economics comes pretty high up in that ranking.
Oh.
And linguistics is disprivileged, unfortunately, but this is completely
Mm.
ridiculous because linguistics is not just difficult, it is also complex. And I honestly find linguistics to be more challenging than economics ever was. So if you have to study it seriously, you will have to make a huge effort. I personally would be destroyed starting from the ground up
Mm.
again. So people can say that, but they probably don't realize how difficult linguistics is, or they think that because you like something, you have to be a professional in this. But that means that I have to be an Olympic badminton player, right? Or I have to be because I like badminton. No, I don't, right? So I don't have to do everything professionally. You can have passions in life, and that's how human beings were designed to be, is to dabble in a lot of things and become a more complete person through a variety of facets rather than being
Yeah.
certified in everything you do, you know. Do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm thinking there might be young people watching this video. So do you think young people should learn more languages, or do you think it's better for them to just focus on the one they already speak and then improve
Okay,
those
so
languages?
there's a deeper question that you're asking in this, that is it more about the quantity or the quality as well? And actually there is a balance element to that. So for example, there are no points in HYPIA for speaking 10 versus 20 versus 30 languages. No. The minimum is six, but there is no quantity element. In fact, it is better in HYPIA to speak seven very well rather than 14, but you're kind of sloppy in all of them. And as I get older or interact with more polyglots, I realize that it isn't so much about how many you can speak, but what you can say in the ones that you speak. And that takes me back to the original community of, or the original human society, that if you speak one language, but you have a lot to say, that is actually more meaningful. And what I have ended up seeing among polyglots is that they'll end up saying a few things in a ton of languages, but they don't have much to say. This is a human, because people in general don't have much to say, right? So it's better to have quality and depth in your thinking and express it
Hmm.
vividly, passionately, because you've thought through it in a handful of languages, seven languages, but you had depth and you thought through things expressed. That is worth far more than even 21 languages where you're just in general shallow and you're repeating the same stuff. So this is a
Hmm.
quality quantity question, I think, that you're really getting at. So that's my view on that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think some people just try to show off and then they say, I speak a little bit of everything, but no. I get kind of angry when people say that because, I put in so much work into each and every language I speak. And then it takes me about like a year or 2 years, maybe 3 years to be able to say that I speak the language. And yeah.
There's plenty of things like this that will make you angry, and I feel the same way. But it's also the counterexample. The counterexample is that you and I, just before this interview, talked for at least an hour, and we're just getting started because we have interesting things to connect on, to share.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter what language that was in. There were things to be said, things to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's what really matters. So when there's plenty of reasons to get angry because people just yap their mouths in whatever they think is a language, as opposed to having a connection with another person premised on deep thinking. So that's what really matters. And we all evidence
Hmm.
that at Hypia, for sure.
Yeah, the fact that we're interested in languages, even if we don't speak the common language, we connect on that. And yeah, for me, it gives me a lot of comfort, and it's like my get away from reality type of. Yeah, gives me a lot of freedom in that sense. Yeah. So what is language learning for you? What does it mean?
I don't have a specific definition because when you look at it from a HYPIA perspective, we're just looking at one function. We're looking at speaking. But it's also equally important to listen and to listen to other people. It's also important in my professional life to write. I write for the public interest. And in order to write well, you have to read well, because the more you read, the better
Mm,
you will write. So we are only looking at a limited dimension. That's a limitation of IPEA. But when language learning comes, these four functions must count. And am I equally good at writing in all of them? No. Speaking all of them? No. So language learning should not be seen as a uniform thing. It depends on plenty of other things. For example, does learning Korean emerge directly from speaking Spanish? No. You have to start from a different software to arrive at the final conclusion. So your point of reference matters. Your age matters. When you're younger, it's easier. When I was in my early 20s, I could eat this stuff up. Now I feel like, wow, I still eat, it's still okay. I still do it, but it does take a little bit more of a push. So plenty of other things.
mhm,
And then the other thing is busy. Many of our members have family lives. Can they really dedicate so much time as they could have once before? No. So language learning is bounded by many factors. And so we have to keep all of those things in mind as we assess and also as we assess ourselves. Like, where am I headed? How much does this matter? And how will I use this in which dimensions of my life? So there isn't a clear answer there.
mhm. Okay. So when you learn a language, new language, do you intentionally choose? I mean, circumstances happen, obviously, but is there a preference of which languages you want to learn, or do you have priorities?
At this stage in life, I find all languages to be interesting and beautiful. And that's President Hypia talking. I'm supposed to say that. It's like the Secretary General says, "Oh, all countries are lovely," kind of thing.
Yeah.
But naturally, we all have prejudices. So I find some languages more beautiful than others. And if I have to pick right now, I actually have at least six that I would like to work on for various reasons. For example, I would like to work on Persian because I used to speak Persian as a child. I used to live in Iran. I actually spoke it. So it's there deep in the mind somewhere. And it's also very close to Urdu. So you have to wake it up. I am interested in learning something totally different, which is Dutch. That would be kind of cool. Not because I find it beautiful. I actually find it a very ugly language, but there is some very interesting elements. But that's my personal view of it. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
as President
Hmm.
IPA. It's just as a person. I am very interested in Polish for personal reasons, right? And I am
Hmm.
exposed to Polish quite a bit indirectly, but it isn't an easy one. It's actually the most difficult I've come across. So those are, and then Italian would be an easy one to add because of Romance languages. I would also like to learn a constructed language, one that's totally made up. It's called Wenja, but its grammar is basically going one step behind Indo-European, which is the ancestor of English and Urdu. So I would like to go back to that. It's a made-up language, but it'll be fun to learn. So that's at least five. Then I would also probably like to touch Bahasa because I lived in Malaysia as a child. I would like to learn that one for the first time. And then I would probably also like to try Korean, which is your L1 language,
Yay.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. I could help you if you ever choose to learn Korean, but it's a
And
very complicated language.
why is it
It's hard.
complicated? Why is that?
I think the grammar, um, a lot of the things cannot be translated exactly into English or any other languages. And the grammar, I mean, if you know Japanese, I think it'd be easier, but in your case, you don't speak Japanese, right? But if you speak Mandarin, you have Chinese character. If you know a bit of Chinese characters, it could help because all the advanced Korean vocabulary comes from that. But otherwise, pronunciation, I don't think it'll be that hard, but grammar and expressions, And yeah.
Well, you like to teach languages. So if it's a
Yeah,
joy for you,
yeah.
it's a joy for me.
Yeah, of course. And then one other question is, do you think talent matters in order to become a polyglot?
Yeah, there is research to suggest that there are some predispositions. For example, there is perhaps a genetic component. There's some research to suggest that. In my case, that is true. So, for example, if I speak seven comfortably, well, my mother also did speak seven, right? So it is a thing. And that's because her ancestors were also good at languages. So it comes from that stream. My brother is also in HYPIA, so there is a genetic component to it.
Wow.
But then there's also obviously huge life circumstances aspects. So Spanish helped, and then I practiced it in Argentina. What a convenience, right? But there are HYPIA members who ex nihilo, from like small pueblos, rose up speaking languages just because of passion. Perhaps they had a genetic
Hmm.
component that was never triggered or activated prior, so they didn't know they could do it. So perhaps there's exposure, perhaps there is genetics, and that's what we mean by talent, right? I mean, then you just refine the skill, you activate it, and then you use it more. But what is your opinion about that one? What do you think?
Um, I think it's undeniable that I have a little bit of talent because I have perfect pitch and
Ah,
I was pretty good at music, playing instruments. And that came in very handy when I was learning languages because I could mimic the sounds. And my pronunciation was always good. People complimented me on that. And then, yeah, and I think you need a bit of talent. It's not mandatory, of course, but what's more important than that is discipline.
there
Yeah,
you go.
having the discipline and putting in the time and just being passionate about it, just loving it. I think that really matters. I
Excellent.
mean, if you don't have talent, you might not sound like native, for example, per se, but you could still be able to communicate.
There you go.
Yeah. And what we're looking for, we're not seeking perfection here. So,
We're
yeah,
not.
no talent needed, I would say.
Absolutely. I have a question for you. As director of outreach now, how can I be of assistance to you in your work? What do you envisage doing? What's the deal now? What would you like to do as director of
What would
outreach?
I like to do?
Hmm.
Um, as we previously discussed, I think it's very important that people who are like us find their tribe and their group.
Yes.
So obviously, I'm going to reach out to people who were at the gathering, and then people already know because we were wearing that t-shirt to advertise. And yeah, reaching out to people and individually, but also community wise. So as you mentioned, being on media, for example, newspapers, I will try to contact newspapers, for example, in Canada, of course, Montreal, but could be Miami, just multilingual cities where I feel like there is a potential of the presence of polyglot community for people who are like us. So yeah, I am going to think about it more over the summer, but now I'm in Europe, in Paris, so I think it's a good opportunity to reach out to people here as well.
That's true.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, yeah. And um, I don't know if you know Hyunwoo. He's the founder of Talk to Me in Korean, the Korean language education company. And
Okay.
he was at the gathering, and I had yeah, I talked to him, and he was very keen on founding or like creating like a mini polyglot gathering in Korea. So if that ever happens, I could reach out to those people as well.
Wow.
And yeah,
Very cool. So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
yeah. This summer, I think this summer is a good time to work on it. Yeah. To reach 5,000, I think, yeah, that's we do need to work hard
We
to
have
reach
four
that goal.
years. There's no rush. There's no rush to get there.
Yeah.
We'd be
Yeah.
80 years old and seeing new people join. Who knows what the world looks like?
But for me personally, there are many continents that I can target. So Asia, obviously, Korea and Canada, North America, and then now that I'm in Europe, Europe also.
That's right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah, it was great interviewing you. I learned a lot from you, and I have many more questions, but prior to this interview, we had an hour long private interview. So yeah, I will reach out to you whenever I have questions, and thank you for being so responsive to my stupid messages. Like just, yeah, I'm just curious about so many things, and whenever something just comes to mind, I just write to you.
Yeah. Well, you're always welcome.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.